neuroscience, quantum physics, biology, plant medicine, non-dual tantric meditative practices. We will be exploring these concepts with experts to provide insight. Get ready to melt reality with us. Welcome to Exploring Reality Maybe. We are so pleased to be with Dr. Linh Love today at Exploring Reality Maybe to explore Chinese wisdom and deep personal and ancestral healing. Dr. Love is trained in multiple disciplines, including being a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture, a certified Tao of trauma practitioner, a life coach, and a Qi Ni Tang abdominal organ massage practitioner and evolutionary astrologer. Wow. Dr. Love's practice focuses on the healing of the whole person, including ancestral and spirit coaching. Welcome, Lynn. It's so great to have you here.
I'm so grateful to be here with you both.
So, Dr. Love, how exactly does Chinese medicine and acupuncture work? Like, what are its roots, and what have you found to be true when working with your patients?
Such a great question. Chinese medicine is an energy medicine. At the fundamental roots of it is an energy medicine. It's based off of Qi, life force, and we're going to talk about that more as we go on, but it's rooted in centuries of documentation, empirical research, trial and error, and the ancient practitioners really compiled all of the things that they were doing for thousands of years and put it into these classical Chinese medical texts, and it was passed on through generations and generations into families as Chinese medicine today. It became traditional Chinese medicine today. And the roots of Chinese medicine, of course, are influenced with the different culture in which it was created. So back then, it was really a agrarian culture. It was highly influenced by farming and nature. And so a lot of the principles that we learn about in Chinese medicine and that we use with our patients, everything is nature-based. Everything is understanding what patterns did the ancient practitioners see in nature, and how does that apply to the body? How does that apply to the mind? How does that apply to understanding illness and the formation of disease? And using Chinese medicine in that way has been so profound for so many patients, because oftentimes what I found when working with patients is I gave them, really it was Chinese medicine, gave them a new paradigm of understanding their bodies, of understanding how medicine is, how medicine works. And it really started connecting dots for people, because people would come into the clinic and say, well, I've been going to different medical doctors and just things have not been working for my body, right? This is sort of the last resort. And being able to give them how Chinese medicine views illness, how Chinese medicine understands that everything is relational, everything's interconnected in the body. One aspect of your body is out of balance, it causes another imbalance in another aspect, because everything is deeply connected. And when I gave patients that understanding, it just started lighting up things for people and started helping people live differently, because that is how life is, right? Everything is so interconnected. Everything's in relationship to another. We don't just live in silos. We live in communities. We live in connection with our loved ones, with our family, with our friends. And in nature, it's the same. Plants are interconnected with the soil, and soil is interconnected with the trees and the birds and the insects living in that ecosystem. And so Chinese medicine is rooted in that same understanding that everything is interconnected. And what I love so much is that the ancient practitioners knew all of this. And so modern day research and science is catching up and connecting the dots of what ancient practitioners knew thousands of years ago. And it's so fascinating.
That's actually a really great segue, Lynn, to a quote that I prepared by Deepak Chopra. So I wanted to read you
Mhm.
the quote and then maybe have you react to it. Ancient wisdom traditions, along with science, show that rivers are our circulatory system, the trees are our lungs, the air is our breath, and the stars give us the atoms that make a solid mass that creates life. We are one biosphere, a personal body, and a universal body. So, what do you think about Deepak's kind of articulation of this point? And do you think this is, do you think this is kind of similar to your philosophy? And would you say this sort of aligns with your approach to the world?
I love that quote. I love that quote because it tells us that our bodies are analogous to nature and that our bodies function similar to a forest, to the ocean, to a fire, to a garden. I often refer to the mind as your mind as a garden, right? How are you gardening your mind? What things are you planting? When do you need to go outside and weed some things and prune back some things? And so this quote is very powerful. It encapsulates that our bodies are so interconnected and they function just like nature. And Chinese medicine is built off of the fundamental principle that what happens above also happens below. So, what happens in the collective, let's just say what happens in the forest, is also on some level what is happening in our bodies. And when it talks about this universal flow of energy, such as, the air is our breath and the stars give us the atoms that make solid mass that creates life. Chinese medicine speaks on this flow in that it's called qi. It's energy, it's life force. It's it's an energy that actually runs and animates all things. And so this is really, I think it's a good encapsulation of what Chinese medicine is speaking to. And it tells us again that everything is relative. Everything is connected to the other and it's on a spectrum. And one thing exists because the other exists. And then, these ancient wisdom traditions are reminding us of coming back to nature and to come back to what we know inherently in our bodies, that our bodies are connected to nature. We can understand what's happening to our bodies when we understand nature. And also, when we even break that down into the five elements within Chinese medicine, and I know we're going to talk more about that too today, but it's one of my favorite things to talk about within Chinese medicine because the ancient Taoist philosophers who created Chinese medicine, who saw that how can we apply the patterns in nature to our body? They then created this five element framework, which we now apply to treating patients and working with patients. But essentially, these five elements are movements. So we have water, fire, air, wood, metal. These are movements in our body, these are phases in our body, just like there's phases in nature. And they're constantly connecting to each other, right? And in Chinese medicine, we learn that they're all relational. Like the earth needs wood, and the wood needs the earth, it needs soil to put its roots into. And fire also gives life to earth, in that when there is a forest fire, that oftentimes creates this fertile soil for things to grow. And so, just like in our bodies, that's also true because each element is connected to an organ. For example, our heart is connected to the fire element. The earth is connected to our digestive system. Our metal element is connected to our lungs, our kidneys, the water element. And so it's fascinating to me how the ancients knew that this also applies to the body, that the fire, the heart, the energy of the heart, and the emotions affect our digestive system, right? When we are in distress or when we're feeling intense emotions, our digestive system is not strong enough to plant new things, to create new chi, to create new life force for us to be strong, vital, and healthy. And also going down the line, if we have a digestive system, our earth element is not in balance, then how can we go forth and live our purposes and go and take action? And when our digestive system, and that what we're understanding now in modern day research of our gut biome, when it's not in balance, it affects our mental health. It affects how we show up in the world. And so I love that quote, and it tells us so much. And Chinese medicine is right there with that ancient wisdom.
Beautiful. Wow. Yeah, I always say that we are we are nature. We are a ecosystem, a living system. So we're not like looking at nature, we are nature. And how we view plant life and animal life is how we view ourselves, right? So there's the extractive mind, and then there's the nurturing mind. And so that was so beautiful. And so speaking of that, like, in your work, you do an incredible amount of work around trauma. And I think it's a very interesting time in history now. There's a lot of tension and things like that. How does your practice help a person deal with personal and collective trauma?
Yeah, thank you for asking this. And you know, my intention and my motivation and my dedication in supporting people in navigating trauma is because of my own personal journey and also the journey of my ancestors. And I realized that from what I've learned, and also, for the people I've helped with just what I've learned, it's it's impacting and it's creating more capacity in myself and in the people I've supported in navigating stress and overwhelm and trauma in our lives. And when I teach people how to navigate stress and overwhelm, it helps people move forward in their lives. And trauma, oftentimes, what I love understanding, what I've loved learning about trauma and how it connects to Chinese medicine is that it all goes back to the body. Our body is our fundamental temple, it's our pillar, it's nature, right? It's our number one relationship, our body with ourselves. And our body is also so deeply connected to the experiences that we go through, the emotions that we go through. And research and studies have shown that our bodies actually store in our cellular memory the emotions, the experiences, the tough moments that we go through. If we can't resolve them in that moment or in the near time that it happened, then it gets stored in the tissues of our body until we're ready to face it. And what I'm seeing nowadays is that so many people, not only that there is collective trauma happening right now in this moment, but people are actually starting to come into realization that there is a lot that my body is holding. There's a lot of like stuck energy that I'm feeling. And in Chinese medicine, we say that stuck energy is the cause of pain. When qi is not flowing in your body, it is a cause of pain. And that is not only on a physical level, it is on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level. And so, what I love is that I help people find resources and I help people find safe spaces so that they can explore trauma and explore maybe these unresolved emotions that's stuck in their bodies. And to also feel like it's safe to connect, it's safe to share, it's safe to be vulnerable. Because oftentimes we lose trust in our ability to call for help, ask for help because we're afraid that we're going to be a burden or we're going to, you know, go go deep and make someone uncomfortable, but actually it's about being vulnerable and being seen in your vulnerability that makes us strong.
Mm,
And I think that's where this comes back to the body and the importance of the somatic work that I do is helping people understand how trauma and how these unresolved experiences and emotions show up in our body, how to sit with it, how to navigate and resolve trauma. And I also want to say that this is not only for our own personal journeys, but it's for our future generations. It's for the children, it's for our communities. And, also research has shown with adverse childhood experiences that the higher adverse childhood experiences or higher amounts of childhood trauma cause higher prevalence of health conditions like diabetes, pain, mental health conditions, and so much more. And so it's so important now that we can create safe spaces and resources and community for people who are working through trauma, who are working through difficult moments of their life. And I also want to say, my last note is that it's all on a spectrum, right? The traumatic stress spectrum. We
mm.
learn this as trauma informed practitioners, but it's on a spectrum. There's complex PTSD, and on the other side of that spectrum, there's acute stress, right? What we experience daily. And so being able to just have the capacity to hold space for it all, right? And that's of course not easy, but I think we get better at it all the time.
So great. And so can you share a bit more about Elena Duncan's Tao of Trauma and its
Yes.
East-Western approach of restoring balance in listeners who've been affected by stressful events in their life?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up because Elaine Duncan is one of my mentors, teachers. She is also the creator of the Tao of Trauma work and the writer of the book, and it's a profound book. It is a East-West approach to helping people regulate their nervous systems, especially after traumatic experiences and anywhere on that traumatic stress spectrum. And this work combines Chinese medicine, so the 5-element framework of Chinese medicine, with neurobiology approach of understanding what's happening in our nervous system when we do go through stressful events. And so when you combine two of those things, it's like amazing at helping people understand what's happening in their body and also giving the tools to help people somatically. So going into the body and helping to resolve and sit with these unresolved emotions and experiences and traumatic moments that they've gone through. So
Um, so, so Lynn, is that related to your work with transformational Mandela coaching? So the the 5-element Mandelas of Chinese medicine that inform, as I understand it, the cycles of life and how life informs nature. So can you sort of tell us how that all fits into your, your approach?
yes, I mean they're all connected. Again, I can't take one part away from another part. It's all deeply connected to each other. But I've mentioned the 5-element framework and that this is a cycle, a cycle of nature that we use to apply to our bodies in healing different health conditions. But what I've learned is that we can apply that framework to everything. We can apply it to our life. We can apply it to what we're going through, even in our personal realms, in our relationships. And so when I do transformational mandala coaching with my clients, I walk them through the different movements and the different phases of the 5 elements. And so when I'm talking about, let's just start with metal, when I bring people to understanding, okay, where are you at right now in terms of this problem? So presenting a problem, presenting a thing, a goal or a desire that this client wants to work on. Metal is really about bringing awareness and using curiosity to understand. Let's talk more about that. Let's talk more about that desired state that you want to be in. Metal is bringing awareness to that, bringing a fresh new air of inspiration into the field for this person. And then we go into water, which is like going into the depths, what feelings need to be addressed here. Then wood is very much about wood. I love thinking about a forest, or love thinking about bamboo and how it reaches up into the sky. It's like, what is your highest vision? What image would you like to create for yourself? And what would be, the best result for you in this? And it goes into fire of do you take action? What connections do you need to be made? And also, how do you celebrate yourself for all the things that you have created and what you have done? Because oftentimes I feel like that's missing with transformational work, or, a lot of like coaching and self-work is missing that piece of celebration. Like, how do we celebrate ourselves now? And that goes into the fire element, the fire phase of how do we break down what you've learned in this cycle, and what lessons have you learned that you can integrate into your next iteration, your next phases. And that continues to go. This mandala is continuing. It's a circle, the cycle. And it teaches people that our life is this constant, we're constantly moving in seasons. There's this deep cyclical wisdom that we're all connected to. And the purpose and intention for this is really to move energy. Because again, Chinese medicine is all about if there's stagnant, stuck energy in any area of the body or in life, that's where we want to move energy. That's where we want to find new resources and find new places to get excited about so we can take action.
All right. So I want to ask you about evolutionary astrology. Two words we don't often hear put together like that. So tell us what you mean by that, and how do you practice evolutionary astrology?
Yes.
Hmm.
I love evolutionary astrology. I mean, I've been a fan of astrology ever since I was, young, and I would love to like flip through and go to the horoscopes at the end of like magazines. And, I've always just been fascinated with the movement of planets and energy and how that affects us. And it lives in the same principle as so above, so below. And we've seen how the moon in different phases affects the earth, and it also affects human behavior. There's been a lot of research on that, and that, when there's full moons and the birth centers, right, people are having more babies during that time. There's a lot of research that's been done that speaks into the planets and the movement of planets affect life on earth. And so that's just a base into astrology. And astrology is giving us another language to understand life. This is what I tell my clients, is that astrology is not the know all be all. It's not to tell you what's going to happen. And it's not to tell it's not a definitive answer, but it is giving us a look into the potentiality of what could happen. It's giving us a pattern, an understanding of patterns. Because when we go into a forest, we never really know what's going to happen. We could see like a toucan, or we could see a puma, who knows? But there's the potentiality of what could happen because of all of the different factors, because of where the planets are in that moment of time. And that's what astrology tells us. When we talk about evolutionary astrology, I studied evolutionary astrology with Stephen Forrest, whose work is deeply immersed in reincarnation, karma, and consciousness. And so when I work with evolutionary astrology, it really brings those principles in there. And it goes deep in. It goes deep into, this is where these planets are, and this is the story that I'm being told about a past life that you've had, and the different patterns and karma and purpose that you're bringing from that lifetime into this lifetime. And so when I've done this work with my clients and even with myself, I have major aha moments because I'm like, our life, when we can bring it back to Chinese medicine. If just like yin and yang, yin cannot exist without yang, yang cannot exist without yin. Our past life cannot exist without this life, and this life cannot exist without a past life. It's all on a spectrum. It's all happening here and now, and they all exist because of each other. And so I bring back these different patterns from past lives based off of their chart into the here and now, and it gives people major ahas about their life. They're like, oh, no wonder why, I had this type of job, or I was attracting this type of relationship, or I had this specific karmic pattern that was happening in my life. And it's really interesting because evolutionary astrology integrates all aspects. It's not just based on the physical. It's the mental, emotional, and the spiritual. It's how do we incorporate talking about the soul when it comes to talking about our lives. And so this is how I've practiced evolutionary astrology, and it's been really impactful for myself and my clients as well.
So this is so interesting to me. I tend to have more like David's mind. I'm not a scientist, but I tend to have both an experiential mind and a passion for like understanding the science of something. And I once was introduced to an astrologer who said, based on what they saw in New York, the whole city was going to be flattened. But what actually happened was the city was rebirthed. And this was right after 9/11. And I think about past lives being, well, I've lived many past lives in this life, right? And so it's all in this very interesting interpretation of language. And I've had incredible readings with astrologers where I take the message or the North Star of what's trying to be said and apply it to my own journey in ways, and not maybe take it literally. And so I appreciate your work, and we could go into 10 past lives in this life with me, and then God knows what. But I do want to like ask you more about something that we look at Exploring Reality Maybe, and that's the ego. And I want to bring this up because I think there's a very interesting, deeper understanding of the ego from a Chinese medicine perspective. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. What is it? Is there a way to understand it, to be engaged with it, to have some mastery over it? Do we need mastery over it? Is it a tool? Is it a problem? Like, what do you think about the ego?
I love that question. And I want to bring it back to Chinese medicine and the fundamental principle of yin and yang theory, because we're taught in Chinese medicine that we can use yin and yang to understand everything. We can use it to understand the body and life, nature. And I like to apply that here with the ego because I believe that everything in nature has a function. The ego itself also has a function. And in many ways, the ego has been, it's such a big question. But the ego has been used it has this protective quality to it. And so when you think about the ego, it exists because another aspect of our mind exists as well. And they are both interconnected to each other. So I want to say that the ego is this part of ourself that is deeply connected to our raw emotion, our raw primitive, maybe instinctual emotions and instincts. And it has a sort of protective quality to it. And it has been used by our ancestors for thousands of years. And just as evolution in humans happen, we become more accessible to the higher aspects of our mind, the parts of ourselves that can engage in logical thought or contemplative thought or even creative imaginary thought. And so there's like those two aspects. There's sort of this egoic, maybe more protective survival mind. And then there's also this other aspect of our mind, maybe our higher states of thinking, higher states of consciousness. And those things have to balance each other out. One thing that I love to say is that if we can step back and listen and create sort of a safe space for all of parts of ourselves to show up and create a non-judgmental, a safe space, a sanctuary for all parts of ourselves, that ego mind, that higher aspect of our mind, the inner child mind, whatever you want to call it. And I think about Buddha's famous saying in that we have to find and walk the middle way. So we have to find a way to balance the ego mind, the higher states mind. And I think that's where the magic can happen, when we can create space for both and not resist one, resist the other, but be able to say everything has a function. So how can we create enough space for that and navigate it in a way that feels constructive for us? And I feel like that would be my take on the ego.
So great.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So let's shift for a moment to your wonderful podcast called Soul Authentic. It is a great name. I love the convergence of the words soul and authentic. So tell us a little bit about what you explore on the podcast and why some of our listeners might want to tune in.
Yeah, Soul Authentic is a passion project of mine, and also something that I feel like it's its own entity. Sometimes I feel I'm like, okay, you're your own thing and you want to be, put into the world. And it's been such a beautiful journey creating that platform. And I call it a platform because I want it to be a space where different healers, artists, entrepreneurs, business people, medicine people can come on and share their journey, because I feel like when we get to share our story, when we get to share what we've gone through and all the ups and downs that took us to where we are now and what we're called to in the moment, our purpose, when one person that resonates with our story and our message can listen to that and something in them changes, even if it's the slightest change, that to me is why I do the podcast. That to me is why I create these spaces, because not only because I'm inspired by the work that people do and the creative process that people go on, but because we're here to create more spaces where people can feel seen, heard, essentially community. And soul authentic is the word that came to me, is because when we can really sit in the authentic state of our being and be our authentic selves, that is when we start tapping into this soul place. They're interconnected. And so I was like, it just makes the most sense for those two words to come together. Because when you're the most authentic, you're the most connected to your soul. So that is the
That.
podcast.
Love that. I can't wait to hear more. Oh my goodness. And so tell our listeners what's next for you. Like, how can they work with you? What are you excited about these days, etc.?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. I am in the process of creating so many things. I feel like I'm in this creative renaissance. I'm most excited right now in creating self-healing tools for people to take into their own lives, so that way they can incorporate it as their self-care routines for their own medicine. Because for me, I want to empower people with these tools. I want to give them the tools so they can do it themselves. And I'm also so inspired by ancestral work, ancestral connection, and helping people reconnect with their ancestry. That's like a big mission of mine right now, is how can we reconnect you to your cultural roots, because that is where your medicine, that's where so much healing can happen when we start to dive deeper into ourselves as the mystery. Instead of looking outside of ourselves, it's going within. What is our body saying? What does my roots say about the body and our health and spirit? And what are the herbs that are used in my culture, right? Like all these things are reclamations in coming back to our soul authentic self. And so that's what I'm most passionate about right now. And of course, I'm making all sorts of courses about Chinese medicine and herbalism, and also working with people doing somatic work and divination arts like astrology. And so I'm constantly doing all the things, and also having the podcast as well, having different people come on and sharing their journey, sharing their medicine out in the world. And if you want to learn more, you can go to drlinlove.com and stay connected with me on social media at Dr. Lin Love across all platforms. And I also have so many free resources as well, like so many free ebooks on Chinese medicine. And I'm releasing new things all the time. It's exciting.
So amazing. And so that's LINH, which is a beautiful way to spell your name, Dr. Love, and you have the perfect name. And so listeners, you'll be able to find all the details of things that Dr. Love has mentioned in our show notes. And we just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, Dr. Love. You're just an amazing gift, really, to the world, and bringing all of this wisdom of deeper ancient traditions to all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to thank you both for inviting me on. It's been such a pleasure to share.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
Miraculix is a small and independent company that has created the first quantifiable home test called Q-test for anyone taking mushrooms or psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, and any other psychoactive substance. So think about this. You're at home, you're with friends, you're hanging out, and you're experimenting with these amazing psychoactive plant medicines, and yet you don't really know the dosage. Miraculix is here to help you really have a positive experience so that you don't overdose. Created by Dr. Felix Bell of Germany. Please go on our show notes and order this package. They're now available in the USA, and we couldn't be more excited to represent this home kit, because we want you to have a truly positive experience with psychoactives to explore your own reality and the way these psychoactives can help you in your life.
Exploring Reality Maybe is written, produced, fact-checked, and edited by Jody R. Weiss and David Schwartz. Research support is provided by Semicolon Connects. Music produced by Nextbox. Visit our website at exploringrealitymaybe.org to find show notes, transcripts, bios, and to learn more. If you like the show, please visit our website to donate.